We are opening the class. I am without my assistant today, so forgive me if things are a little clumsy as I get things going. Whoa, 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 whoa. There we go. Okay, welcome to our class. Welcome to the Facebook audience. We're live on Facebook as well. Tonight we begin Purim. Purim is an unbelievable day. A day of tremendous, 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 tremendous joy. Here we go. Everybody's arriving. I'm just getting set here. A day steeped in holiness, a day steeped in mystery, a day steeped in the hiddenness of God. It's a very, very special holiday that begins tonight. Some of us, observant people, are also fasting today. It is the fast of Esther that precedes the holiday of Purim. For those unfamiliar with Purim, it's basically the story that is given over in the biblical book of Esther. And tomorrow at noon Pacific, noon PST, I will be reading the book of Esther. That is our tradition here at Accidental Talmudist. With a spirited reading is what I'll be doing, with a funny hat, no doubt, perhaps even a bit more of a costume. It's a tradition to wear costumes on Purim. Some call it the Jewish Halloween, although there's no other parallels but the costume. But it's a spirited holiday, and it'll be a spirited reading, so you can tune in tomorrow on Facebook. And in fact, if you go to our Facebook page right now, there's a reminder. The post is already there, and you can press the button, get reminded when we go live with the book of Esther. Now, Esther fasted, right? So the Purim, the original story in the Bible, it happened in Persia, and it was a time of incredible danger for the Jewish people. Haman, like the modern Hitler, really sought to murder all of the Jewish people in one day. Very ambitious guy, and we were saved, right? We were saved, and in fact, the Jews were not only saved but came out completely on top. And Haman and his minions were destroyed. What's interesting about the book of Esther is that God does not appear in it. Perhaps is it the only? I think it's the only book in the Bible where God is not mentioned. But the holiness of Purim is that God's hand appears throughout the Purim story. And so, as we're always talking about here at Accidental Talmudist, we live in God, not just in God's world, in God. And so God's presence is something that we seek to tune into. And Purim is all about tuning into God's presence all around us. That's what the story of Purim is about, and the observance, the modern day observance of Purim as well. So we prepare for that encounter with holiness by fasting, right? In the original story, Esther was fasting because she was going to undertake a tremendously dangerous errand, which was to go to approach the king at great danger to herself and intercede on behalf of her people and reveal that she's one of them. The king didn't know she was Jewish until she approached him with that information. And fasting is a way of preparing for such an encounter. So forgive me if I'm lightheaded today. We're all fasting here. There are other observances that are associated with Purim itself. 4 things that a Jew is taught to do on this festival of Purim. One is read the Megillah, specifically hear the Megillah being read. The Megillah, when we say the whole Megillah, this phrase is very common in American English, the whole Megillah, what we're referring to is the book of Esther and reading it on Purim. There are actually other Megillot, other books that are sort of called a Megillah, but really in common parlance, when we speak of the Megillah, we're talking about the book of Esther and reading the whole thing on Purim. And in fact, we do it twice. We do it Purim Eve, which would be tonight, and on Purim Day tomorrow. here at AT. We're only going to do the broadcast tomorrow at noon. So you got to go hear the Megillah somewhere else tonight. And as a matter of fact, hearing the Megillah online virtually is very sweet, and it's a kind of an entertaining thing that we can do together as a community. But it will not, you will not have fulfilled your obligation to hear the Megillah read just by hearing it online. Better than nothing, but really read the book yourself. It's easy to find the book of Esther at the very least, or better, go somewhere where they are reading the Megillah in your area. Number 2, we are required to give money, charity, to 2 poor people at least. Very important. In fact, Purim is the biggest giving day of the year in the Jewish world. I guess there's very charitable days in sort of secular society at the end of the year when everybody's in that holiday frame of mind. But the biggest giving day in the Jewish world comes a couple months later now at Purim. So I'll just get a head start on that. Here's $1. I'm going to put in my tzedakah box. And in our home, we have a few of these tzedakah boxes, and periodically we distribute the funds. That's nice. Now for sure, I'm covered for giving one of those givings, but better give it face to face, right? So if there's somebody homeless that you see in your area, give them the $1 face to face with a smile, say God bless you or something similar, so that you're extending that human touch and that face to face encounter, which is one of the ways that we meet God. Third requirement is to give at least 2 kinds of food to at least 1 person. And so this is the Mishloach Manot. Right now, we've got, I think, 8 bags that Nina and the kids are going to be delivering tomorrow. This is part of our synagogue tradition, and it's kind of a big distribution where we create these gift bags and have at least 2 kinds of food and a bunch of other nice things in there too. And we distribute them to other members in our community. And plus, we'll do it for our own friends. Some people are very elaborate, but at the very least, the little gift bag should have 2 kinds of food. And you should give these gifts of food to another person. And that's recreating what it says right in the book of Esther, that once this became a yearly holiday, which Esther and Mordecai, her uncle, who became the number 2 guy in the biggest empire that the world had ever seen, as a result of the events of Purim. So the Jews went from, as we'll read tomorrow, being almost annihilated in 24 hours to having, the head of their community become the number 2 guy in the universe. Very similar to the Joseph story in Egypt. And and then they decreed a holiday, and that they would recount the events of how these things happened every year and celebrate by giving gifts to one another. And the 4th requirement is the Purim feast. You should have a Suda, you should have a nice dinner. And at this meal, and it has to be a meal within your means, a person who doesn't have a lot of money should not spend more money than he has on the Purim feast, but within one's means, he should make a nice feast. And at that feast, you drink. This is the one day of the year when we are supposed to drink. I mean, at Passover, there's the 4 cups of wine, but those are much more of a ritual thing, and it's about the holiness of the wine. At Purim, it's about getting drunk. You're actually supposed to get intoxicated to some extent. How intoxicated? Lots of opinions. And we're going to be talking about that today because there is an unbelievable, mysterious, inexplicable passage in the Talmud that no one can understand. Everyone comments on it because no one can really understand it. It is an insane moment in the Talmud. This is Accidental Talmudist. We've been doing a lot of Torah here in our class. Today we're going to actually do some Talmud. Okay, so we're going to go into the Talmud. We're going to go into Tractate Megillah. These are the laws of Purim. I'm going to examine this story. Before I do that, I just want to mention a couple things. One is we are in the week, the Torah portion this week is called Kitisa, which itself is an unbelievable Torah portion. Purim doesn't always land in Kitisa. I think it actually usually does not land in Kitisa. This year it did. Now Kitisa is, you talk about extremes. On the one hand, in Kitisa, we receive some of the specific commandment that the children of Israel for their generations will observe Shabbat, right? And so the beautiful prayer that we sing at Shabbat, and one of the prayers that every Jew knows or has heard, it's beautiful. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael. That's in this passage. And in this same Torah portion, we have one of the lowest moments in Jewish history, one of the lowest moments in human history, the golden calf, right? Moses is up there on Mount Sinai, directly taking dictation from God on the law for all time. The whole Jewish people is so elevated. We've already had the moment of receiving Torah just a few weeks ago in Yitro, in Torah portion Jethro. And here, just a short time later, Moses is late coming down the mountain. The people panic and create a golden calf. And it's horrific, and it's a sin that still has a residue to this day. How can both of these things be in the same Torah portion? Tune in next week. I would have done it this week, but it's Purim, so we're going to talk about Purim today. Next week, God willing, we'll be doing Kitisa. So tune in for that. I also want to say it was just a week ago, and the reason we didn't have class last week is because we did our huge fundraiser. It was a tremendous moment in the history of accidental Talmudists when we really were going to see, can this thing go forward? Will it be self-sustaining? Are we going to be able to expand and reach more people? Can we count on this community? And Baruch Hashem, and thank you to this beautiful community. Yes, the community stepped up, and in 24 hours, we hit our goal and even went a little past of raising $200,000. It was scary because it was all or nothing. If we didn't make it, we were going to get nothing. And with just a few minutes to go, we were short. And then some angels who had been tracking the whole thing for quite a while stepped right in at the end and made sure that we went over the top. It was incredibly exciting, incredibly gratifying. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone in this class and everyone following us on Facebook who stepped up and became part of Accidental Talmudists in this really, material way, right? When you contribute money to something, you become a partner in it. It's something that you believe in. It's something that you want to happen. People want, our mission is to increase peace in the world by sharing Jewish wisdom with all people, with everybody. It's always been said the Jews are meant to be a light unto the nations. Nina and I believe we can't be a light unto the nations if we keep the light to ourselves. And so 5 years ago, we started shining this light. We really can't do it alone. We needed the support so that we could do this, and we got it. So we're very excited about what's to come. This money is just going to enable us to really do what we do and get a little more infrastructure and expand into a few more areas, which is crucial because this has been primarily a Facebook operation all along. That's how all of you found us, I imagine. And Facebook has changed its rules. And so the same stuff that we were putting out, when we had 500,000 followers, we were reaching more people than we are right now with 1 million followers because they changed the rules. And a nonprofit like us is in the same boat as Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola can afford to spend huge money on advertising to get their message across. A nonprofit like us cannot. So we really need your help sharing this stuff, telling people about it. If you're not already on our email list, just go to accidentaltalmudist.org, get on the email list, and that way you'll be sure not to miss things. If you're on Facebook, make sure you go to Accidental Talmudist. You've liked it, right? Make sure you've liked it. And then under following, there's a pull-down menu and click see first, right? Because otherwise you will not see our stuff. They just are prioritizing other things, either friends, which is nice, but we don't count as your friend. We're a page, and so we get counted in the same category as other businesses, Nike, Coca-Cola, AT. But they have the immense marketing budget, and we don't. So be sure that you sign up for the email list and you've clicked see first in the following pull-down menu at Accidental Talmudist. All right, enough with the housekeeping, but not enough with the gratitude, really. Thank you, everybody. We're very honored to be your Accidental Talmudists. Okay, so in the Talmud, we have this passage. This is in Tractate Megillah, and page 7b, right? So every page in the Talmud has an A side and a B side. This is 7b. This was a page I encountered relatively early in my journey through the Talmud, my 7.5-year journey, which that's another story, but that's how I became the Accidental Talmudist. This was day 715 of a 2,711 days. Now, page 7b. Rabbah said, one must become so intoxicated on Purim that he cannot distinguish between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. Rabbah and Rav Zeira celebrated the Purim feast together. They became intoxicated. Rabbah arose and slaughtered Rav Zeira. The next day, Rabbah prayed for mercy on Rav Zeira's behalf and revived him. The following year, Rabbah said, let Master come and we will celebrate the Purim feast together. Rav Zeira answered, not every time does a miracle occur. Let's unpack this story a little bit. First of all, we're talking about the laws of Purim. So Rabbah is bringing down some laws. This passage comes among other laws of the Purim feast. When you have a feast, who should be at the feast, what time you should have the feast, what you should serve at the feast. Like everything in Judaism, there's details to the observance, and the Talmud is discussing all these details. So in this area of the Talmud where rules are being brought down, there are areas of the Talmud which are much more about legends and fables and hyperbole, but there's other areas which is really just about details, law, areas of Shabbat observance, areas of Passover observance, and here areas of Purim observance, how we do it. So within this list of rules, Rabbah is telling us one must become so intoxicated on Purim that he cannot distinguish between cursed is Haman, the bad guy in the story, tried to kill all the Jews, and blessed is Mordechai, the hero in the story. So that's a degree of intoxication which is pretty high. Okay, I mean it's a lot of drinking there, and then we go right into, it's not clear who is now talking. Is Rabbah talking and bringing this as an example, or are the editors of the Talmud now bringing this story to somehow comment on this law that was just given, that you need to become so intoxicated? And Rabbah, okay, so Rabbah means the great one, and Rabbah, this is his name, sort of his nickname in the Talmud, is a sage of tremendous importance. In fact, elsewhere in the Talmud, it says that Rabbah called himself an average person, a Benoni. And I think it was Abaye, another sage, said, don't call yourself an average person, because if you are an average person, then the rest of us have to die right now. I mean, there's just no chance for us to live in this world. You are so holy and so exalted and so learned and so everything we all aspire to be, meaning we the sages who are already huge tzaddikim, huge righteous people, are looking up to Rabbah as the epitome of the righteous person, right? So this guy, Rabbah, invites, well, who gets invited to Rabbah's table? Somebody of, amazing stature, perhaps an equal or close to an equal to Rabbah. So these are two of the most elevated sages in the Talmud. They're going to celebrate the Purim feast together. Evidently, they observe this law that you need to become that intoxicated. And Rabbah arose. Arose is interesting. He got up. And slaughter, the verb is shecht, the same verb we use for killing an animal, a chicken or a goat, a kosher animal. And when we slaughter it so that we can eat its meat, for the meat to be kosher, the animal has to be slaughtered in a kosher manner. And so Rabbah shechts, somehow this word of kosher killing, but it's killing, right? So he kills Rav Zeira. And then the next day, Rabbah prayed for mercy. The next day? Like you would think, oh, I was really drunk, we're fooling around, I kill my friend, I might, at that moment, everything becomes really serious. I don't wait till the next day to pray for mercy and get this guy back, but he waits till the next day, prays for mercy, and resuscitates, resurrects his friend, revived him, here's the word, and then the following year, Rabbah says, hey, let's do it again. Last year was so much fun. Come on back. And Rav Zeira, perhaps not surprisingly, says, you have your way of celebrating Purim. I have mine. Yours involves murdering your friend. Mine does not. But he doesn't say that. He says, yes, I would love to come, but a miracle doesn't happen every day. Presumably the miracle is that he was dead and was resurrected, and he doesn't want to rely on that miracle. What's going on here? I mean, these are our holy sages. They're going to get so drunk, they're going to commit murder, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and then they're praying, and then they want to do it again. It's a very difficult story to understand. So first, let me bring out that I first started studying this story thanks to our dear friend of blessed memory, Schwartzy, Shlomo Schwartz, who is just such a holy yid, and really the rabbi here in LA most responsible for bringing Nina and I back into Torah by making it so warm and inviting and beautiful and learned and menschy. I miss you, Schwartzy, so much, and so I teach this in your name. And I wrote, actually, what I'm reading from is an article that I wrote it was the second article I wrote when I started the Accidental Talmudist blog in 2012, and it was called, so the short version of this was called Murder at a Purim Feast. And then I went back into my notes to see it today, and I actually wanted to see if it's still online, because the Jewish Journal reconfigured. And then when I Googled it, I saw there's another Murder at a Purim Feast, same title, but it's a 90-minute class taught by Y.Y. Jacobson, who's a genius. I mean, he's really just one of the big teachers in the Chabad world. And he's going to go through this same material at a much deeper level. So if you are very interested in the sources and all the ins and outs of this story, I recommend you hear Rabbi Jacobson's version. But for the record, Murder at a Purim Feast was published by me in 2012, and his came out in 2016. His is just much deeper. Now, the reason that both Schwartzy and Rabbi Jacobson bring this down is because what they were both mesmerized by is the Hiddush, the fresh take on this story that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave. And Rabbi Jacobson was present when the Rebbe gave his interpretation of these events in 1984. So it's really great to hear Rabbi Jacobson's version. I mean, he's just a brilliant speaker and hilarious and mesmerizing. And he was there when the Rebbe gave this down. So it's really worth listening to Rabbi Jacobson. When I studied with Schwartzy, the version we got was a very tight one from the Rebbe, I think in a book called Beacons of Light or Beacons of Thought, something beacon of the Rebbe. At any rate, that's my background with this story. All right, so let's get into this. There has been this tradition of how other commentators understand it. So let's get into those before we understand how fresh the Rebbe's take on this was. Okay. So regarding Rava's declaration that you need to get intoxicated, Rambam, Maimonides, who's just, maybe the greatest codifier of Jewish law, one of the greatest philosophers in the history of the world and of Jewish history, Maimonides really took a look at the entire Talmud, And his goal was to make it a little bit more accessible, right? So that every Jew would know, okay, so what is the law in any given situation? What am I supposed to do? And that's what his Mishnah Torah is. And then later there was the Shulchan Aruch, which does the same thing, right? The Talmud is just filled with arguments about the law. And there's many places where you can't just quote the Talmud and say the Talmud says this and that's the law, because it's not. Because the Talmud is a record of discussions about the law. And having heard the discussion, then you need to know, well, where do we come out on that? What is the law? What am I supposed to do? And the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Torah are all about that. So Rambam says about what it means that we should get so intoxicated that we can't distinguish between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. He says one should simply drink more than usual, just enough so we fall asleep. And thus, we can't tell the difference between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai because we fell asleep. This is a very safe approach. You don't want to advise young people, especially, that they should go out and get rip-roaring drunk. Here's a way. You're drinking more than usual. You are getting intoxicated. It is having an effect on you. And in the end, you can't tell the difference between one and the other because you're asleep. Not really a satisfactory answer. That doesn't seem to be the literal meaning of what Rava is saying. And Rabbi Jacobson brings down that Rambam is a very subtle guy. And when he says you should fall asleep, it doesn't mean and just pass out and be dead to the world. He's talking about a kind of sleep that has a deeper meaning, and we'll come back to that. Rav Ephraim says the story was included by the original editors of the Talmud in order to disprove Rava's rule, right? Rava says you should get so drunk you can't tell the difference between one and the other. The editors of the Talmud right away include this story to say actually Rava was wrong. You should not drink that much, because if you do, you might come to do something as terrible as even the saintly Rabbah did in killing his friend. Okay, he was lucky, he was amazing, he was so holy, he could bring his friend back from the dead, but that's not for the rest of us, so don't drink like that. But what has the law become? As I mentioned before, the Shulchan Aruch, that's the place where we go when we want to know, what does the law say? What are we supposed to do? And indeed, the normative law in the Jewish world and the Orthodox and the ultra-Orthodox Jewish world, you get drunk on Purim. So that story did not succeed as an example, as a cautionary tale to illustrate the idea that we don't get drunk. In fact, we do get drunk. So why is this story here? Rambam's son, Rabbi Avraham, says this passage is an example of Talmudic hyperbole. There's another area, I believe his name is Rabbah bar Chana. Not this Rabbah, another Rabbah. And I think I'm going to try and remember this, put a pin in this, to come back and study these passages, maybe with this class. But there's this whole area in the Talmud where it's sort of like one legend after another, where this guy is on a ship and then they see an island and they get off and they have a feast and a feast appears, but then they realize the island is a whale and the whale turns over, but they're saved because there's a ship. And it's the kind of area in the Talmud where it's meant to be an exaggeration and a hyperbole and a parable, right? A teaching story. But this story of Rabbah and Rav Zeira is not in such an area. As Rabbi Jacobson says, location, location, location. There's areas of the Talmud that are about fables and parables. This is an area about tachlis, the rules. What do you do on Purim? When do you make a feast? How do you make a feast? With whom do you make a feast? What do you do at the feast? One of the things you do at the feast, you get drunk. And so within that list of rules, we're not going to find a story that is all about hyperbole. There is something about this story that is there for a reason, and we are meant to understand it literally. Literally. This is an important principle in Torah study. When we study Torah, there are 4 levels, right? The acronym in Hebrew is Pardes, the Peshat, the Remes, the Drosh, and the Sod. The Peshat is the simple meaning. Okay, and there's things in Torah that are tough for us to understand, especially with our modern ear. But we're meant to understand that everything that's in there is literally true. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions about this. It is not easy to understand things as being literally true. That's the beautiful challenge of it. So we still have to try to make things literally true. This one, we want to understand it as literally true, but we also want to get that remez, right? That hint of something beneath the surface, that drosh when we go deeper, and that sod, that secret. There's a secret lying underneath this story, and that's where we're headed. But we have to make it work at both the literal level and that mysterious inner level. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. So who was this? So Rabbi Avraham said, Rabbi Avraham said it's hyperbole. I'm saying it's not hyperbole. Rabbi Avraham said hyperbole. And so what happened was, the reason the verb shecht was used is because it was on the neck. And what happened was, in the exuberance and the boisterous celebrating and drinking, Rabbah, you can imagine, why did Jews talk like this, right? When they're explaining something, why do they talk with their hands like this? Because there isn't always room to talk like this. Okay. So maybe Rabbah, in his exuberance and telling a story, he hit Rav Zeira on the neck, struck him a hard blow. We call it shechting. Rav Zeira was injured, but he recovered. That's what Rabbi Avraham is saying. But we're trying to get something more literal than that. Maharsha says, the commentator Maharsha, that it was the intoxication itself which caused Rav Zeira's near-death experience. And thus, after Rabbah plowed him with wine, he prayed that Rav Zeira would recover. In other words, Rav Zeira just drank way too much. And Rabbah prayed, oh, please, don't die. Please come back. And luckily he was spared. I mean, you can die from alcohol poisoning. Not even just an alcoholic, who eventually dies of alcohol poisoning. And by the way, everything that we're talking about here, I just want to note immediately, an alcoholic is not commanded to drink on Purim. In fact, if you are an alcoholic, if you're a person that is suffering from the disease of alcoholism, you are strictly prohibited from drinking at Purim or at Passover or at Shabbat or any time. Okay, so there's an understanding that different people have different sensitivities, and this is not for an alcoholic nor for children. Okay, so Maharsha is saying that he just drank too much. I just heard this terrible story. It happened. This is a real story. I think it happened a couple of years ago in Mexico. Some guy actually retired, young, .com millionaire, moves to a resort area that he always loved visiting in Mexico, like a beach town. He's living in paradise. He goes out at night to have fun. There's a bar, tourists are drinking, and he has a few drinks with them. And somehow somebody makes a bet, you can't drink a whole bottle of tequila. So this idiot who's already had a few drinks, and that's why his judgment is so impaired, I'm sure. I mean, he was a .com millionaire, and he must have had some wisdom before this event. But having gone a little impaired, he says, oh, yeah, I could do that. And so he takes the bet, drinks a whole bottle of tequila, and dies. Right? So there really is true danger in drinking too much. And Maharsha is saying that something like that happened. Thank God, not a whole bottle of tequila, but much more than Rav Zeira could handle, and he was in danger, but Rabbah prayed for him, and Rav Zeira recovered. Very nice, a nice telling of the story, explains it, makes the story a little less interesting, because that's not what it says. It says Rabbah shechted, that Rabbah did some kind of a kosher killing of Rav Zeira. So here comes the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He says this story, we have not understood it until it is both literally true, there was a death, and the events of this story reflect on the characters in them in a way that we can understand. I mean, these are holy, holy people. These sages are our holy sages, our Halakha Chachams, right? Our Chachamim, our holy sages. I just mix Yiddish and Hebrew, but forgive me. So the point is, we have not understood this story until there's a death and a resurrection and something becoming of such people. So how are we going to get there? All right. What the Rebbe does is he points to Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu. You will recall that, and this is coming. We haven't encountered this yet in this year's cycle of reading the Torah, but it's coming soon in the book of Vayikra, in the book of Leviticus, that after right now in our cycle, we are building the Mishkan, right? We are building the tabernacle in the desert. We've just had a collection. People donated all the materials that were needed. This week, Betzalel, a master craftsman, gets appointed. He's going to be in charge of the project. And we're going to build this beautiful, beautiful, heavenly ordained tabernacle in the desert where all the worship is going to happen. The focus of the entire 2 million children of Israel in the desert is going to be on the Mishkan. The sacrifices are going to be brought there. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, Aaron himself, Moses' brother, will serve there. And his sons, the other Kohanim, the other priests will officiate. And that is the entire, focus of the worship of the children of Israel. And immediately after this thing is built, right? As soon as it's put together, it's inaugurated, and everyone is celebrating that we now have this tangible home for God in our midst. What happens? Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, in a very terse story, they come into the Holy of Holies, the holiest place within that tabernacle. They bring a strange fire, is what it says, and they die. They're consumed by something. And what happened? What happened? I mean, were they just crazy? Did they just, what's it called? Trespass where they shouldn't have been? The very next law that is given in the Torah after this tragic event is, and when you come into the sanctuary, don't drink. And so Rashi brings down that the obvious conclusion is the reason they died is because they went in and were drinking. They were drunk when they went in. They thought that it would be fun to get closer to God, this place where they themselves are priests. They would be invited in there to be in that place of holiness, if they did it the right way. But they went the night before. It's almost like you can just imagine these young guys, hey, tomorrow we're going to be in front of all the people. Let's go check it out tonight. And they had a few drinks, and they shouldn't have been there, and they died. The problem with this interpretation is, after they die, Moses says to Aaron, the grieving father, I knew that this place, this Mishkan, would become sanctified through one of us. I thought it would be you or me. Now I see it's through your sons, Nadav and Avihu. They are greater than us. So Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, the greatest prophet in the history of mankind, humankind, has just stated that these two guys are the holiest people who ever lived, bigger than Moshe, our greatest prophet, and Aaron, the first high priest. What made them so great? Not getting drunk and stepping into the Mishkan when they weren't supposed to. What is going on here? Are we getting closer to understanding the conundrum, or are we more confused? There's another Gemara, another spot in the Talmud. It's in Eruvin 65a. And it's an interesting story. In that story, the prince, the head of the Jewish people, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who would be the one responsible for putting down the core of the Talmud, called the Mishnah. This was always supposed to be an oral tradition. But there was a time of great danger when the Jewish people were really just in danger and the sages were being killed by Roman persecution. And he said, we better write this down or it might be lost. And so Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, also known as Rebbe, like the rabbi, when he was, in his own court, he was the prince of the Jewish people. the head of the Jewish people. And he once had a dinner, and he had his brother there and his nephews. And his nephews were very quiet. They weren't saying anything. And he knew that they were quite learned guys with beautiful Torah to share, even though they were so young. And so he says to his brother, give them something to drink. They're too quiet. Maybe it'll loosen their tongues a little bit. So they say, hey, your uncle, the head of the Jewish people, says drink, so have a drink. So they have a few drinks. And after they've had a few drinks, they say, Mashiach, the Messiah, will not come until this family is no longer in charge of the Jewish people. A very impertinent thing to say. You can imagine going to the White House and say nothing good will happen to this country until this administration is out of power. This is not going to find favor with the ruling authority. So, Rebbe says, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have given them wine. And his brother says, hey, listen, you said give them wine. Don't be so surprised. And then here's the saying, when wine goes in, secrets come out. Yayin and sod, these two words, the word for wine and the word for secrets, have the same gematria. The letters that spell these words, in Hebrew, every letter is also a number, and they both add up to 70. So there's a relationship between wine and secret. What is this relationship? In their case, those two boys visiting Rebbe's house, visiting the Nasi, the prince, maybe they felt that things weren't being run correctly in that kingdom, and that's what was on their mind, and they said it, right? It's an old story that wine loosens the tongue. But the interesting thing is, when the tongue is loosened, what is it that comes out? What kinds of secrets? Well, it really depends on the person who's doing the drinking. Those two boys perhaps had an axe to grind. They had a criticism. Perhaps their criticism was really based in the folly of youth. If they were older and understood better what Rebbe was dealing with and all the difficulties that he was balancing and running this very difficult people. It's not easy to be in charge of the Jewish people, God knows. They would understand better. But that's what was in their mind. When somebody like Rabbah, such a powerful and holy sage, when he drinks, the secrets that come out of his heart, the stuff that he cares most about, is on a whole other level. What the Lubavitcher Rebbe is telling us about Rabbah is that when he would use wine, he would use it in a very particular way. And he would use it in the same way that the sons of Aaron used it, Nadav and Avihu. They used it to escape a little bit the mundaneness of this world. As I say all the time, we don't have souls, we are souls. We are souls, but the vision of the soul and its complete connectedness to its source, to God, and to every other soul is something that we can't be experiencing on a constant basis and live in this world. In other words, if you have a prophetic moment, a transcendent moment, sometimes people have that moment in nature. Sometimes people do LSD and are just tripping out of their minds. Sometimes it just comes on someone. Sometimes it's a near-death experience. Sometimes it's with a shaman, a witch doctor in Peru. I had a friend that I used to learn Taekwondo with. Straightest guy you ever saw, never did a drug in his life. But once a year would go to Peru and do this drug ayahuasca with a shaman and a bunch of spirit guides and just leave his body, right? So there are many, many paths to sort of break through these doors of perception and be part of that greater spiritual world. But when you are part of that greater spiritual world, there's danger. Number one, you can't be, one with the universe and driving the carpool to your kid's school, right? Does not work. You need to be in a state of readiness, and you have to have a vessel that can handle it. And not everybody can. You need only go to a Grateful Dead show where, a lot of people are probably doing the same kind of drug, Some of them are, dancing, having a good time. Some are sitting and zoning out. Some of them are going to the emergency room because they can't handle it. So, before one experiments with any kind of moment like this or meditation or whatever door is going to open it for you, you need to know who you are. You have to have a very, very strong sense of who you are. And this is why the Kabbalistic masters would say you can't start studying these kinds of secrets till you're 40, till you're well established, till you have a strong sense of identity and wisdom and a kind of a knowledge and a system of knowledge and an image system which you could bring with you when you have such a moment. Rabbah could handle it. He was a person that was well-trained, well-versed, a real mystic. Rav Zeira did not have that same kind of mystical capacity. There's a related story also in the Talmud, Tractate Chagiga. This is one that you may have heard. 4 enter the orchard. 4 enter Pardes. What they mean by enter is they enter this mystical realm, right? This place where the body falls away, the sort of regular life around you is nullified, and you cleave to this intense, real holiness. Ooh, Jeff, let me mute you there. And in that place, 4 went in, and only 1 came out whole, right? Who was it? So Ben Zoma went into that place. So 4 of them learned how to do it. There were 4 sages: Akiva, Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, and Elisha ben Avui. They were together. They were young students. They were absolutely in love with God and Torah and fascinated and wanted to touch that higher realm, wanted to know what heaven is like, wanted to know what the world of souls is like, wanted to see that hidden presence of God in this world. And they figured it out. They figured out how to get through that door and sort of get into the Garden of Eden, right? Get into that spiritual realm. What happened to them? Ben Zoma lost his mind. He lost his mind. He went crazy. I've seen that happen. I went to UCLA Film School. I had a great friend. His name was Chad. He was an actor, brilliant actor, acted in lots of movies. You can see him. Still a very dear friend. He had a roommate with whom he was sharing an apartment. A guy he didn't really know. UCLA just assigned them to live together. This roommate, I'm pretty sure that the drug that he did was ecstasy. Ecstasy is a drug that is known as the love drug. A lot of people do ecstasy and go to raves and dance parties and have a beautiful time, have nice conversations. This guy did ecstasy, lost his mind. He did. I mean, a few days later, he was still just raving nonstop. The drug had worn off. He was still talking like a maniac. He actually ended up confined in a mental ward. And I think that he, eventually got out and got on some kind of medication and, God willing, got his life back on track. But he never came back to the acting program at UCLA. I have no idea what happened to that guy. So he was like Ben Zoma. Ben Azai went into that place, touched that incredible holiness, and died. He never came back, and there was no one to revive him. Elisha ben Abuya, who was perhaps the most learned of that generation of Torah scholars. Everyone talks about, and some of his teachings are still preserved in the Talmud, which is amazing because he went bad. He came back, he said, there's nothing real in this world, there's nothing that matters. This whole Jewish thing is nonsense. And he became not just a heretic, but a collaborator with the Romans to persecute other Jews. Horrible story. And so they don't even say his name after that. They just call him Acher, the other one. And only one of those sages was able to enter that realm in peace and return in peace. And that was Rabbi Akiva, the really holy Rabbi Akiva. And perhaps he was able to do that because he was more mature than the others. He was older. He didn't start studying until he was 40. I don't mean he didn't start studying Kabbalah and Zohar until he was 40. He didn't start learning Hebrew until he was 40. He only started when he was 40. He realized that his life was off track. He realized that thanks to his wife. A man must always listen to his wife. She knows more than he does about what's good for him. I know that's true. I couldn't do anything without Nina. She is my pole star, my guiding light, my muse, and she corrects me when I'm wrong. Thank God. So Akiva got on track late in life, but went really deep and just became one of the greatest teachers in human history, certainly in Jewish history. And he was able to ascend to that place in peace and come back in peace. Only 1 out of 4 could do it. And these were super holy, righteous, and mega wise individuals. Nadav and Avihu, very young, the sons of Aaron, they were completely in love with God. You can't blame them. They had been appointed to serve, to be the closest ministers to God. The only one closer than them in their role as priests would be their father, the high priest. So they were invited to come close, and it's an understandable mistake. They were God intoxicated. When they went into the sanctuary, it was because they wanted to be close to God. Maybe there was some drinking that went on with that, but the drinking just kind of released some tension and let them feel, oh man, this is amazing. I just want to be closer to it. I want to be closer to it. And when you come too close to the sun, when you come too close to this degree of holiness, you can't take it. And they were nullified. And so we have a teaching elsewhere that it says they were burned up, but their bodies were not burned. It's just their souls left their body. It was that intense of a holy experience. Their soul left their body. And so the Lubavitcher Rebbe is telling us these stories to bring us back to Rabbah and Rav Zeira, to say Rabbah had this capacity to use wine in a very holy way, to let his soul just leave its physical shell, ascend to heaven, be connected to the Holy One and to the angels and to everything. And he brought Rav Zeira with him. Rav Zeira was more like Nadav and Avihu. He loved it. He wanted to be close. In fact, when he got that close, he just wanted to run away from his body and go there and be part of it. And he was gone, and he wasn't coming back. He was going to be like Ben Azai. But Rabbah was able to pull him back, say, no, not yet. It's not time. You'll get there eventually. We all die. We're all going to that place. But not yet for you. I'm bringing you back. So Rabbah was great enough that he could actually pull a soul that was running away from its body back into its body. That was the miracle. And the next year, when he says to Rav Zeira, hey, let's do it again. It was awesome. Maybe now your capacity is a little greater. You'll be able to be more in control. You won't get that close where you're going to leave. Rav Zeira said, listen, I got a wife, I got kids, I have students. That's for you. My capacity is different. That is not the path for me. I'm going to do it my way. I'll celebrate Purim. I'll drink, but I'm not going to get into the mystical secrets of the universe with you. You go there. I'll go my way. So the Rebbe gave this over. It's interesting. He gave over this story after Purim. It was 1984 on the Shabbos after Purim, not before Purim, because he knew that there would be students there. It's like, oh, I want to be like Rabbah, Maybe you can be like Rabbah, but we have to understand ourselves well enough to know, am I like Rabbah? Am I like Rav Zeira? What is my capacity? How far can I go? Where am I drawn? So we do have a commandment to drink and to get intoxicated on Purim. But you have to understand your own capacity and how you're going to use that substance. And so the last thing I said, I would mention that Maimonides is very subtle when he talks about going to sleep, that you just drink a little more until you go to sleep. But sleep is also a way that he elsewhere in the Mishnah Torah characterizes prophecy, right? We don't have prophets anymore, but the Talmud does say that sleep, it says it's in Tractate Brachas, the first tractate, that sleep is like 1/60th of death, and dreams are 1/60th of prophecy. And so there's a subtle clue here that Maimonides is saying, the Rambam is saying, drink till you get to that state. For some, it's just sleep. For some, it's dream, right? Dream, where you're getting to that touch of prophecy. But it takes just age and experience to understand yourself well enough, where you're going. I guess to a young person, I would say, never drink fast. Drink slowly so that you can see your needle. Like, where are you on the drunk stage? If you drink a lot quickly, like that poor guy in Mexico who drank a whole bottle of tequila, he had no control and he ended up dead. But if you have one drink at a time, okay, you can stop. I've gone a little too far. So you stop, you take an hour off, you take a nap. You can catch up later with the rest of the gang. My prayer for all of us is that we understand our capacity and stay within it, and that we drink like these two men for a holy purpose, not just for fun and entertainment. All right. I'm here for you. I'm taking questions.
Let me just jump in and mention that Jeff has a very special Megillah that he would like to show us.
Beautiful. I'm unmuting you, Jeff.
Okay, there's enough light there? I've tried to turn the camera around so it's not mirrored.
So this is beautiful. So first of all, that's a parchment. That's a real Megillah, right? This is
from about 1550. It's been in my family since it was written in Germany when the Sephardim went down from Spain.
Did you just say 1550?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Let me just highlight that so everyone can see this. Spotlight video. Okay.
There we go. Okay. So you can see the first word. There's Achashverosh. You can see that. Let me get to the beginning. Yehi b'mei Achashveret.
Wow.
Who Achashveret, HaMelech, who's the king, etc., etc.
This is beautiful, beautiful.
Not going to unroll it any further than that because the parchment's a little stiff, but that's the beginning of it.
Okay. So thank you for sharing that, Jeff. That is unbelievable. All right. So that's a real Megillah, everybody.
It's the big Megillah.
and Jeff, do you actually read that Megillah for people?
From the beginning, I'm trying not to open it. I'm going to be taking it down to San Diego to the people who do the Dead Sea Scroll work to see if we can make sure it's preserved.
Right. It probably needs a little bit of by an expert, of course, but like a little bit of oil. Like it needs to be soft.
I'm loath to open it up because I don't want to crack the parchment.
God forbid.
It's shape for that age. So it's been in my family since that time. It's been passed down generation to generation to generation.
What spectacular! What a blessing to have such an heirloom. Incredible.
I thought I'd share that with you. So,
thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Wow, what a treat. Ronald was wondering, why is there a different trope for the Megillah than when chanting Torah?
I'm thinking.
There's a different trope for everything. And there's many different trope written even for the Torah. There's a whole series of different, depending on who wrote that set, that particular trope, and they're credited to different people. So for the Megillah, again, you don't want to have the same holiness. The Haftarah is different. When you're reading the Torah, you'll have one that is a unique, separate.
Jeff, let me just jump in for a second and first say that Jeff is a Hazan. He's a cantor. He's a professional, so he's speaking as an expert here. And second, that what we're talking about, trope, we're saying that when there's a public reading of the Torah or of a piece from the prophets or the writings, which is called the Haftarah, or the Megillah on Purim, there's a very specific way that it is sung. Okay, so that it has to be sung, and it's not just random singing or what the reader feels like singing. There's a specific way that it should be sung, and so what the question is that it's a different trope, a different style of singing for the Megillah than for the Torah on a Shabbat in synagogue. So go ahead, Jeff.
That was basically it. But that it's written so that there is a distinction between if it's a Megillah or if it's the Torah, that you don't read the same way because there are different levels of importance. There's different distinctions, and you want everything to be distinct. And you want someone who in the assembly is down the road can listen and say, the Megillah is being read, the Torah is being read. We hear the melody.
Very
we hear
good.
what's happening.
Thank you, Jeff. I want to get into a couple of these questions that came in through the Q&A feature as well as the chat room. Judah Rosen asked, according to the Lubavitcher Rebbe's explanation, what about the word for slaughter, the shechting? I would say that it's a beautiful use of the word because it's a kosher killing, right? How can one sage kill another sage and it be a kosher event? Shech implies kosher. So the only way that there can be a kosher killing is that it's done for the sake of heaven, and it's not some kind of bloodbath. It's not some kind of accidental or drunken rage or any of those things. What made it kosher is that it was this kind of ascent with two souls going together, helping each other, go to that place of souls, to that higher spiritual world, and so there was. The death that accompanied that is the soul leaving the body. And then Rabbah's incredible prowess and power was to bring that soul back. And Marianne Blank asked, why are there no prophets today? When did prophets cease to be? So my understanding of that is that the end of prophecy was the end of the first temple. And that's when God sort of retreated to a more hidden place. Even when the second temple was restored, so that the first temple, so this is around 500, right? So around 500 BCE, the first temple is destroyed. 70 years later, the Jews are allowed to come back. It was Nebuchadnezzar in Babel who destroyed the temple. Then there was the exile, the Babylonian exile, of most of the Jews. But then Nebuchadnezzar, yes, he was used as the instrument to destroy the ancient kingdom of Israel, or what was left of it, which was Judah. But when you're used for such a thing, you're good. It won't be good for you, right? So Nebuchadnezzar is quickly deposed, and then eventually there's another king, and it's I think his name is Cyrus, who says, yeah, you Jews can go back. And so the kingdom is reestablished under Ezra, the scribe, but the second temple is never the same. And there's a degree of holiness which is missing, and there are a bunch of sort of constant daily miracles that were occurring in the first temple that were not there in the second. But the idea that prophecy was gone meant that it was actually, and Maimonides would say, it was a natural stage in the evolution. It was necessary. And just as eventually the second temple would be destroyed, and then there would be no more animal sacrifice, Maimonides would say that too was necessary in the evolution of the Jewish people, right? So when the sacrifices would eventually end, what were they replaced with? Prayer. And when prophecy ended at an earlier time, what was it replaced with? The rabbis, right? The rabbis with learning. Meaning, prophecy is something that, how many people can be prophets? One school of thought on that is it was only the ones who were chosen, and there were just very few, right? The Bible names them, they were the prophets. Some would say there were actually schools of prophecy, and there were people who aspired to become prophets. But in any case, really microscopic number of people. How many people could be a rabbi? A lot of people, right? And so it became this meritocracy where through ability and talent and hard work, you could come to a place where you would sort of master all of Scripture, and then you would be able to hear the voice of God in Scripture. And that is available to everybody if they dedicate themselves. And so we say, when I pray, I speak to God. And when I learn Torah, God speaks to me. And that's what we're doing right now. God knows I'm no prophet and I'm not even a rabbi. I just love Torah. And by creating this moment between us and we're learning Torah together, we can bring down the words of great, great sages like Rabbah and Rav Zeira and the Lubavitcher Rebbe and Rabbi Jacobson and Schwartzy and all the great teachers that come into our lives, and we recount their words in their name and understand how these viewpoints differ. And we start to triangulate and figure out through all these clues what it is that God wants from us. I mean, why did God ever give prophecy to prophets? It's to tell, so that they could tell the people what God wants from us, right? And so, when we look into this study, we can hear God speaking to us. Nina, did you want to name another question? No? Okay. I'm just looking through over here. Okay, great. If there's another question, I'll stay a little bit. We always want to be mindful of people's time. It's 11:06 a.m. here in Los Angeles.
Warren wanted to know how to find Rabbi Jacobson's article that you mentioned.
Just Google "murder at a Purim feast." And in fact, the one, I need to republish it because it was published in the Jewish Journal so long ago that the version that will come up there, it's totally butchered. Like, the links are all dead and text has been eviscerated from it. So I will republish that on accidentaltalmudist.org. I'm just making a note to do that. If it's not already, I'll put it in there. Before we go on, yeah, that's no good. That link is no good. Don't go there. The one of the Jewish Journal, it's just unreadable, my article. But his is easy to find. It's just the other murder at a Purim feast, and it's on Kol Live, which is the main news source within the Chabad world. Before I answer another question, we are all together. This is an opportunity to pray as a community, and specifically to pray for those who are ill. And so please join me in asking God, please grant a complete and speedy recovery to these people. Babette bat Sarah, Ahavemuna bat Chava Etta, Golda bat Shandel, Chaim ben Rose, Chaya Esther bat Sarah, Chuck Wright, Jeff Wayne, Wyatt F, Jen W, Orkin Stacey, Munawar M, Annie McGregor, Andrew Gentry, Yitzhak Pesach ben Miriam, Finn and Liam C, Chenua Talmage, Michael ben Denise, Rachel S, Benjamin ben Adina, Yosef Yitzhak ben Bracha, Greta D, Matisyahu Yoel Baruch ben Gittel, with whom I spoke this morning, and he's doing well, thank God. Donna Smith, with whom we spoke in person for the first time, on the phone, but actually heard your voice during the fundraiser last week, and it was beautiful to hear you, Donna, and we pray that you have good days, easy days, and a miraculous healing. Esther Rachel, Slovak, Scott Miller, Deborah Yael, Bat Bruna Alta, Eliezer Ben Shua, and would anybody else like to add names? Say them now. Please, God, pull these souls close to you for healing and for blessing. Okay. Oh, and Ed, you're here. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I was able to speak with Ed as well. And may you be inscribed for complete and speedy recovery. Complete recovery. Okay. Was there any other business I wanted to cover? I don't think so. Next week, Esther Rachel Slovak passed away. Thank you, Taya. May her memory always be for a blessing, and may her soul have a great, great elevation. Next week, we'll be speaking about Torah portion Ki Tisa. It's this week's Torah portion, but this was Purim, so we'll be covering it next week. An amazing Torah portion that includes both Shabbos and the golden calf. An amazing high and low there. And it is always a blessing for Nina and me to be your accidental Talmudist. Thank you again to everybody who participated in our fundraiser last week. We are very grateful and excited about what those resources will enable us to do for this community. Facebook has changed its algorithms. If you want to be sure to catch the class, so you're watching on Facebook, you should register for the class, accidentaltalmudist.org/learn. That's where you can register for the class. But for everything that we do on Facebook, you will miss it. I mean, our reach has been cut more than in half, as all pages have, by the new algorithms. And to avoid missing our stuff, sign up for the email. We don't send them that often. We just send out a little digest of the best stuff that we've been doing recently. For example, last Thursday, we had Manis Friedman on Accidental Talmudist Live. It was unbelievable. Nina and I were like, everything that he said, he kept saying amazing things. He's speaking about the joy of intimacy. And that's a show you got to see. And so in our email, we'll send the link to it, and we'll get some clips out of it as well. But normally that might have popped up in your feed, and now it doesn't. So to make sure you see things, go to Accidental Talmudist, make sure you've liked it. And under the menu that says following, pull down menu, hit see first. You can also click get notifications for all posts. But you got to take that action to tell Facebook this is something you care about and are interested in. All right, my pals. Thank you for being with us. We wish you a very holy and happy Purim, Purim Sameach. Tomorrow at noon Pacific, I'll be reading the Book of Esther, and it'll be a spirited reading, I promise. With God's help, we'll do that. All the best. We send you love from Ella.